Thank you very much and welcome. Well, it's my role in these evenings to frame the debate. And I think for most New Yorkers, we're all very familiar with the liberal critique of George W. Bush. But even from a conservative perspective, the Bush presidency could be seen as far worse than Bill Clinton's. Clinton was for free trade. He spent a lot of political capital getting NAFTA through versus a Bush administration with steel tariffs and ethanol subsidies. Clinton had welfare reform. This administration has had the first new entitlement of great scale in the last 40 years in prescription drugs for the elderly. Clinton had a balanced budget. This administration has had absolutely out of control public spending. On the other hand, consider the following. This administration accomplished something that nobody would have thought possible. They kept America safe after 9/11. And then think about a president like Nixon, who was so reviled in his time, but whose rapprochement with China really set the stage geopolitically for everything that transpired, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the emergence of the Chinese economy. Sometimes a historic perspective gives a very, very different view than what you see at the moment. And finally, consider Jimmy Carter. He invented the term stagflation. We had 13% inflation, no economic growth, 19% interest rates. He abandoned the Shah of Iran, who was a staunch American ally, enabled the Ayatollahs to take over in Iran. His ineptitude during the hostage crisis emboldened Russia to invade Afghanistan. There was a truly awful president. So there's a lot to be said on both sides here. And it's my pleasure now to turn the evening over to John Donovan and the outstanding panel that we've assembled tonight.
And may I just invite one more round of applause, sustained applause, for Mr. Rosenkranz for making all of this possible. Welcome to the Symphony Space in New York City. We are here with a sold-out audience for an Intelligence Squared US debate in which the motion is George W. Bush is the worst American president of the last 50 years. That is, Bush 43 is the worst president of the last 50 years. I'm John Donovan, your host and moderator, and tonight we have arguing for the motion an esteemed panel. To my left, your right, beginning with Jacob Weisberg, who is editor-in-chief of Slate and author of The Bush Tragedy. Joining him on the same team, Simon Jenkins, a distinguished British newspaper editor and commentator. Arguing against the motion to your far right, Karl Rove, former Deputy Chief of Staff to President Bush. And his debating partner, Bill Kristol, editor of the Weekly Standard and Chief of Staff for former Vice President Dan Quayle. The Intelligence Squared and Intelligence Squared US debates are supported by the Rosenkranz Foundation. Now, shortly, you will be hearing from our four panelists, two for the motion and two arguing against. But this evening is a contest of wit and skill and logic and ideas, and in that contest, you are the judges. We are going to poll you twice during the program, once now and once later. We want to poll you to see where you stand on the motion. After that, the debate will be open for our opening statements, and then we'll come to questions for you, the audience. So if you turn to those keypads that each of you have at your seat, you press 1 if you agree with the motion that George W. Bush is the worst American president of the last 50 years. 2 if you do not agree that Bush 43 is the worst president of the last 50 years. And number 3 if at this point you are undecided. Does anyone need more time? Terrific. We'll come to those results shortly after we hear the opening statements from the panelists. But at this point, let us say, let the debate begin. Our motion is George W. Bush is the worst president of the last 50 years.